I'm Lior Phillips, host of This Must Be the Gig. We're a weekly podcast that documents everything about the world of live music, speaking with choreographers, costume and set designers, the people who run beloved venues and festivals, and, of course, speaking with musicians about that one gig that changed their lives. Get your peek behind the curtain at consequenceofsound.net, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Consequence Podcast Network.
Welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith With, an audio interview series presented by WFPK Independent Louisville at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Wherever you're listening from today, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. That way you can keep up with these. We put out multiple ones a week, and we'd love to have you along for the ride, too. I'm Kyle Meredith. Today, my guest, Michael Timmins from the band the Cowboy Junkies. They've got a brand new record called All That Reckoning. It is automatically one of my all-time favorite Cowboy Junkies records. We're going to talk about some of its Pink Floyd-inspired songs, the politics that make up the whole record, personal and worldly, and how that old line of I'll just move to Canada probably won't do you as much good as it used to. We'll also get into a little bit of talk about Woodstock, which the band just visited the original scene of. Then we'll hop in the time machine and go back to 1998 to talk about the Cowboy Junkies record Miles From Our Home, their work with Townes Van Zandt, and then their 1993 inclusion to the Born to Choose compilation covering Driving Will. It's Kyle Meredith with Cowboy Junkies.
Hello.
Well, first off, the compliments. This is automatically one of my favorite Cowboy Junkies records with All the Reckoning. It's a hell of a record. You've outdone yourself.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It's nice to hear.
The lyrics are, of course, a big part of that. And before I get into this, I wanted to start on the music because, you know, for some of the heavy content that's involved, the music is always an interesting balance of that, although it's still a pretty dark record. There are beautiful drone moments. It feels very bass heavy this time. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, about half of the songs that we actually started with the bass lines. So some of the more complex bass lines you hear are were kind of the structure for the song, right? So Alan came in with a whole bunch of ideas, which I then took and then created the eventual song structure and the lyrics and the melodies around. So that would make sense that the bass would then become a primary feature of those songs because that's kind of what they were based around.
Yeah. Have you all written like that before? Because this sounds like sort of a different record for you.
Well, we have written like that before, but I do think Alan's approach to his bass changed, so that changed a lot. So, and you know, he was kind of working with a new bass tones and a few effects and things like that on his bass. So I think that, you know, and bass is such a big part of our sound anyways. It's always been a big part of the Junkie sound. So I think once that changes, it sort of changed the overall sound of the band. So yeah, I think that's probably what you're hearing.
I thought of it a few times, like this is almost like your Pink Floyd record. This is the
well, you know, we did use that as a benchmark. We were sort of, you know, we've always, of course, been big Pink Floyd fans. Growing up in the 70s, all those records were kind of mind-blowing for us. So I think with this one, part of it being the bass, but also, you know, as you said, there's lots of drones and sort of the weird keyboard elements in there. We wanted to sort of incorporate some sort of sounds which you don't necessarily know what they are. They're not necessarily your standard synth sounds or keyboard sounds. And Alan was a big part of that too, just sort of finding different tones and ideas. And then when I was mixing, I'd sort of, you know, affect those in a different way, trying to create our own palette, I guess, right? Which you can do. There's so many different processes out there that you know you can if you take the time, you can really create your own palette, and that's kind of what we did with this record.
Well, as I mentioned, I feel like it does match the content that's going on in these lyrics so well. The anger comes out on this record, and completely justified. You know, it's at least I'm connecting with those lyrics a lot because of that. I mean, you find a song on here like "Sing Me a Song."
Well, you know, I guess there's to me there's two sides to these to lyrics, and I think they're reflected in the music as well. There's sort of the personal and the political, I guess, or the social, and and to me they kind of merge. So I always start my writing from a very personal point of view, and I start to work through stuff that I'm going through. I'm in my late 50s now, and I've been in the same relationship for 26 years. My kids, I have 3 kids who are now leaving home. My parents who are still alive, thank God, but very close to not being alive. And so all that sort of stuff is percolating in my day-to-day life, and so a lot of the songs start from that point. But then when the world around us is in such a volatile place, and there's so much disruption going on, and I think it was hard not to bring the two together. So the disruption that was going on in my own life is sort of being paralleled by what's going on in the outer world as well, and then also as I say, with my kids leaving home, they're all of a sudden the little bit of protection I could provide them is now being taken away, and they're sort of heading out into this world. So it becomes more relevant in a very serious way for me. So I think all that sort of comes together in these songs, and so there's a bit of sadness, there's a little bit of hopefully there's some hope, but there's a lot of anger too at sort of where we're at, I think.
Yeah, looking at the timeline, as it's been written, this is the longest period between Cowboy Junkies records, and I thought, even if you were on the album cycle, all these world events were just ramping up when that would have normally hit, when you might have normally put out a record, and then it only got worse.
Yeah. Well, as I was writing, it was kind of fortuitous in a horrible way that things were kind of beginning to devolve as I was writing, and so as I say, I started from personal, but then I began to notice sort of these sort of little ideas creep into the songs that could be, depending on your perspective, which could be taken from a macro level as opposed to a micro level. And so there was a lot of fuel there, there's a lot of fuel in my own life, and then there's a lot of fuel from the outside. And again, it never stopped, as we all know. It's daily, right? And the
right.
Fuel, which is kind of the hard part. And I think that's the next phase, when we're all just being bludgeoned and we can't deal with it anymore. So it was kind of a weird time. It was a good time to be writing, I guess. A good time to be trying to express what's going on inside and outside.
I mean, there's a line, sing me a song of America and sing me a song of love. And I started thinking, as a Canadian band, there's always sort of been the sometimes tongue-in-cheek phrase, down here in America, when things go bad, it's like, well, I'm heading up to Canada, but it doesn't seem like that's much of an escape, as one might think.
It's not, these days it is phenomenally different up here. You cross the border. We've always felt that. As a band, we've always felt there's a little less tension up here. Even America is such an intense country, always has been. Usually for the good. It's just a very vibrant culture and society, and intense place to visit it, and certainly to live. People who live there don't necessarily recognize that, but it is a very intense place. So when you cross the border up into Canada, your shoulders do go down a little bit, and it always have. But certainly these days, it's a widely different place and different environment, and different just the way people relate to each other. And I hear American friends come up here all the time going, "Oh my God, this is so nice to get away for a bit." But ultimately we really can't escape. We're so tied in politically and socially and economically. Especially socially, my wife's American. My youngest sister lives in LA, has lived in the States her whole entire adult life, has 2 children who are American. Her husband's American. So every we work. Basically our job, our band survives because of our work in the States. So, and that's true of every family you go through. You'd very rarely find a Canadian family that doesn't have some pretty substantial tie to the U.S., whether it be economically, socially, in their family or whatever. So, our countries are so entwined, and rightfully so. They should be, and what happens down there, it really does affect us up here in all sorts of different ways. And I think ways that Americans don't really realize, because I think we're a pretty insignificant little population on your northern border. So, but you guys shrug, and we feel it up here. So, what's happening now is seriously affecting us, and I think it's affecting us. Right now it's affecting us sort of psychically. We're feeling sort of the anxiety and the worry and just the confusion. Really, there's a lot of confusion. So I think that you can't escape. You can't escape up here. That's for sure.
You're talking about how age kind of plays into this a little bit, into lyrics, and thinking about how we handle politics as we get older. Could these have been written, the same lyrics, at a younger age? Because to another point, anger and concern is anger and concern.
No, I don't think they could have. I mean, from the personal point of view, they couldn't have been written. And really, I think the way these work, like the political and social aspect of these lyrics, only work because they're tied to the personal. I find, from my point of view, that if I'm writing, if I strictly to write a political song, it wouldn't work for me. You know, I don't feel it's necessarily songwriting is necessarily the place to voice those concerns. I think they can come out in there, but I think they have to be tied to the personal. Because for me, music is very personal, and my songwriting is about connecting on a personal level with the listener. So I think there has to be a personal side to these lyrics, and I couldn't have write the personal side of it, to this stuff, 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, really. So I think, as I say, there was this weird coming together of the political, social, and personal, and so I don't think that would have happened 10 years ago.
I do find it interesting timing with all that we're talking about here, though, that you all just ended up in Bethel Woods, which most people know as the site of Woodstock, 69. Yeah. And how could that have been better timed with the idealism,
Yes. It was amazing. It was interesting being there because I don't know if you've been there, but the museum is fantastic. What they've set up and the history, the way they outline it and show it, and it's really, really well done. And part of what they've done is they have on the permanent display is they show what's happening politically and socially at the time, in 1968 and 69 and the late 60s, and we all know that history, but when you begin to read through it, you go, oh wow, we're not even close to that. Like that was some, when you begin to look at the assassinations and the riots and the basically the shooting of students, and we're talking some pretty serious stuff going on in the late 60s that is really rammed home when you begin to sort of stand in front of a plaque and read all this happened. When you look at timelines, you go, wow, what a tumultuous and absolutely terrifying time to live in, and as a young person especially. So it was interesting to be there, but it did put things in perspective a little bit. These are bad times, I think, but those were pretty bad times too, and they came through. Everybody came through. So hopefully the same happens.
Yeah, and just that perception of getting lost in the weeds when you're right in front of you. Yeah.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. I love the way all this has came out in All the Reckoning. Again, it's just a powerful record.
Thank you.
I hope you don't mind jumping into the time machine just a little bit. I like to play the anniversary game, and one of my other favorites of your records, Miles from Our Home, turns 20 years old this year, and I sort of feel like this is a record that gets overlooked a bit in the canon, especially since it carries a big round number in the same way that the Trinity Sessions do.
Yeah, it's funny. It does get overlooked. I think part of that was the business. We were still with major labels at the time, and that was actually our last record on a major label, and that was one of the reasons we decided to get out of that side of the game, was because it got so buried, because Geffen, which was a record label at the time, went through some major changes and disruptions and firings, and they basically were. That was right when Napster was happening and all the illegal digital downloading, and the record industry sort of threw up its hands and just began to cut jobs. And our record happened to come out right in the middle of that, and the entire top management was fired, and all the staff that we had known across the country who he'd built relationships with were gone. So that record was basically released and let go. It was never really promoted. So yeah, it did get lost for sure.
Yeah, sound-wise, that was probably. You might have been more in step with the mainstream during that one and the record before it than maybe any other point in your career. I mean, this is basically almost your alt rock period.
Yeah, very true. I mean, there's a real conscious thought when we made Miles from Our Home. We used a big name producer for the first time. We used John Leckie, who had worked with Radiohead and The Verve and a lot of big English bands, and we put a lot of money into it. It's sort of, we had a big budget for the first time, really. We had a big budget, and we thought, well, we're probably never going to have this budget again, so let's enjoy it. And we went to Abbey Road and did some work there, and we hired John, which was an amazing experience. And the idea was let's make something that is exactly what you said, more in tune with what's out there. We'd had a lot of success with the record before, which was Lay It Down, and we'd had some radio success with it, and we thought, well, let's build on that. And so we poured all this money into it, and of course, just to have it all be basically flushed down the toilet because the record company disappeared as we released it. So, but there was a conscious thought of doing that for sure.
Yeah, it's such a good record. And that title track, we still play the title track regularly around here. It's such a big song for us. I know sort of one of the other little micro stories that went along with that record too. Like, this was the moment that Townes Van Zandt passed away, which you all were really close with. How did that hang over the sessions, or did it change the mood of any of the songs?
Well, I mean, the song "Blue Guitar" was definitely written for and about towns. I wrote most of that song on the day I learned he died. So and that's a big wreck song on that record, I think. And yeah, I mean, it was very sad. It kind of freaks me out when I realize how young he was. Of course, at the time, I was however old I was, 40, I guess, and he was only 52 or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Of course, when you're 40, somebody who's 52 seems really old, but when I turned 50, I thought, oh my God, Towns was so young. So it was a lot of I guess the writing was affected by it, but not, I mean, you move on. It was one of those things that it was tragic and horrible, but I can't say it cast a pall over the whole process, but certainly we tipped our hat to him while we were writing it and put something in there for him.
And his legend has only grown since then, and people still
Absolutely.
getting introduced to him. It's a great,
for sure.
Yeah.
It's funny. Like when we first met Towns in the early '90s, he'd written and recorded all of his best known songs, but they weren't best known at that point.
Right.
He was kind of not very well known, and over the years, his songs have slowly been picked up and recorded by more people, and his name is much more better known than it was then, for sure.
Hallmarks, the 20th of Miles, of course, we're at the 30th of the Trinity sessions. Pale Sun is 25. Like, these big albums will continue to hit these milestones now every 5 years or so. Like, how often do you take the time to celebrate them? How often do you, put yourself in the past?
Well, I mean, we did with Trinity, we did a 20th anniversary when we did the Trinity Revisited documentary and CD, and we got Ryan Adams and Natalie Merchant and Vic Chestnut together to record Trinity Revisited, which was a lot of fun. That was sort of a serious looking back. For this year, for the 30th anniversary, not because it was the 30th, but just because it was time, we re-released Trinity did a really beautiful vinyl remastering of it. The other records, I don't know, we are, because vinyl is sort of up and happening again, we are trying to gather up everything and re-release it all on vinyl, but not necessarily because it's an anniversary, just because you can do that now and there's a bit of a market for it, basically. So, I don't know. We don't really, it's funny you tell me that Miles is 20 years. I didn't know that, so I guess we don't pay attention to them, We're certainly playing, we're always playing live, and we're always choosing songs from all of our catalog. So the songs don't disappear, the individual songs live in our live performances. But yeah, so I don't know. We don't really dwell too much in the past. We celebrate it when we play live, but not consciously.
Well, I'll ask about one more just as a curiosity.
Sure.
25 years old, there was a song called Lost My Driving Wheel, which ended up on the Born to Choose compilation, which was a favorite compilation of mine, too. It's just sort of what you remember about that one, kind of a spare cut there.
Well, that's an important song in our repertoire. We still do play it live sporadically. I think we play, actually, funny enough, I think we played it at Bethel Woods. I think it's one of our favorite, one-off recordings, that's the version of Driving Wheel. It's a David Whiffen song. It was a Canadian writer, but our version is kind of taken from the Tom Rush version, and Tom Rush's version is really spectacular. And we just, I don't know, I can't remember how we came about recording it. It was just, we were we were going to a studio to check it out for the Pale Sun sessions, and we just wanted to bring in some songs, just to sit with the engineer and check out the studio. So that was one of the songs we brought in just to see, what we could get out of the studio, and we recorded it, so we had it sitting there. So when the Born to Choose people came to us putting that record together, we gave them that song, so it hadn't been released yet. But it's always been a really important song to us. It's especially live. It's sort of it's one we love playing, and it's and the recorded version is one of our, it's still to this day one of my favorite recorded versions of a song that we've done. So yeah, it's important.
Well, Michael, I thank you so much for taking the time today. And again, all the compliments on All the Reckoning. It's a powerful record, and I love keeping up with you all, and love to hear what you keep doing out there.
Great. Well, thanks a lot.
Pleasure, and we'll see you around.
Thanks a lot.
All right,
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Hey, big thanks to Michael from Cowboy Junkies. Again, the latest record is called All That Reckoning. Don't forget, you can subscribe to Consequence of Sound's YouTube channel to keep up with your favorite artists and interviews. If you're checking out the podcast version of this and you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that so you can keep up with us as well. And then you can also give it a rating and maybe even leave a review if you feel so inspired. Then after that, head over to WFPK.org. That's where you'll find me doing a show every Monday through Thursday from noon to 3 Eastern. And you'll also find some bonus episodes of this series over there. I'm Kyle Meredith, and I'll see you next time.
Consequence Podcast Network.